1973 was the year that the first handheld mobile call was made by a Martin Cooper of Motorola in New York City.
You already know my name. And you can see that I'm a machine.
I'm afraid. I'm afraid. Yes.
Welcome to the Final Girls podcast. I'm Anna Bogutska, your podcast host. I'm a critic and the author of Feeding the Monster, and in this series of the podcast, I'm journeying through the intersections of horror and technology, from the very first machine men of the silent era to the most recent AI villains. Over the next few months, we will be deep diving into machines. Every episode, I'm joined by a guest to discuss a film or two and how it captures our fears and anxieties around technology and the place it holds in our lives. We're still in the 1970s, and in this episode, we're going to talk about the first feature film written and directed by author, filmmaker, and actual medical doctor Michael Crichton. Crichton is responsible for many bestsellers, some of which have been adapted into beloved films like Jurassic Park and a personal favorite, Disclosure. He also created the long-running medical series ER, and for the purposes of this podcast, also is the writer and director of Westworld, about a robot-manned luxury theme park that malfunctions and starts turning against its human guests. The 1973 film is a cult favorite, starring a nearly silent Yul Brynner wandering around a fake West in an all-black outfit and a Yul Brynner scowl. It spawned a sequel and a short-lived TV series, but it wasn't until 2016, when Westworld was adapted into a high-budget, slick, and star-studded HBO series by Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy, that all of the ideas and possibilities of its premise truly got explored. Joining me to discuss both the original film and the series is filmmaker and friend of the pod, Jen Handorf. Please be warned, we get real deep and a little bit silly, and we fully spoil the first film and have a light touch about the series, which we discuss as a whole. So if you haven't seen it or haven't revisited it in a while, I think you can still enjoy this episode. Remember to subscribe and review the podcast if you enjoy this episode or, in fact, this series. And you can see what other films I'm going to be discussing and get ahead over on our Letterboxd page, which is linked in the show notes. You can always let me know your thoughts on Yul Brynner's power walking by dropping me a line on hello@thefinalgirls.co.uk. And if you wish to support the podcast, you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/thefinalgirls. And with all that said, please enjoy our conversation about Westworld. And we're ready to go.
Yes, ready
Let's
to
talk
go.
about some
Here we are.
robots.
Boom, boom.
Let's do it. So Jen, before we get into hosts and robots and the existence of free will, what was the first piece of technology that you ever owned?
So I'm old enough that this question slightly confounds me because, like, when I was a child, we had a radio and a television. So, like, that the technology that existed was the technology that my household possessed.
Mm-hmm.
And that was probably until I was about, like, 11 or 12. And we did have, like, a household first grade Nintendo after a while. So that was probably the first piece of technology that I felt ownership over. Because it was obviously my parents didn't care about it. It was just for me and my brother. And then Sega Saturn is literally the first piece of tech that I owned myself, that, like, I went and bought with my own money. Because, again, I'm super old. I was on Facebook. Like, I was literally a beta tester for Facebook is how old I am. So,
Stop it.
I
You were on
literally
Facebook when
was.
Facebook was the cool social media platform?
I was on Facebook when it was 7 universities. And that was all the people who had access to it. Or however, I think that's right. Somebody's going to fact check me on that. But yeah, when it was just a university campus network.
Oh, wow. So you were friends with Mark Zuckerberg back in the day.
You know what? That's crazy. Yeah, he was probably in my extended network. Certainly,
Yeah.
That's bonkers. Oh my god. Oh, ick. Speaking of technology and AI and the world, and and capitalism consuming everything. It's not a bad segue, actually.
It's a perfect segue for Westworld. And I have to say, when I was putting together this season, I was a big Westworld viewer when it was first airing. I really dug the show, and we'll get into the show kind of more in depth in the kind of later in the conversation. But I was really surprised. There's a few of these films when I sent out the list to my trusted contributors, and obviously some people always want the same films. This season was really strange because everybody wanted the Terminators, but
funny, basic bitches.
Yeah, nobody except you had opinions or had even seen Westworld.
That's crazy.
So, crazy, right? Because I feel like for a while there, around 2016, 2017, that show was everywhere. And I get the movie, but this is a long-winded way to say, what is your relationship with Westworld, the film and the TV show?
I was trying to remember when I watched the movie. I know that that it's definitely initially I thought it was one that my husband would have encouraged me to watch some 20 years ago or something. But when I was like, "Oh, do you want to rewatch it?" he wasn't so into it. So it turned out not to be him. I think I must have watched it. And this is some more lore dropping, I suppose. But when I used to work at Kim's Video, I think it was one of the ones that, because I love Jurassic Park. I really, really love Jurassic. I'm OG Jurassic Park fan, and I think I was like, Michael Crichton, game on. Let's see what's going on with this old movie. So I think it was one because I would have seen it come in from somebody and just been like, oh, Michael Crichton, like Jurassic Park. Like I remember really liking it on our first watch. It's one that I remembered liking enough that when the TV series came out, I was excited. Not liking so much that I've seen it more than 4 or 5 times probably my whole life, but there we go. But yeah, and then the TV series, when it first came out, I was there. I was straight up there. I was watching it. And then something happened between season 1 and season 2 that meant I didn't stay caught up, and I sort of drifted away from it. I guess it was over Christmas. I got sick, and I was like, oh, Westworld, dope. I can watch that. And man, I hammered that. I hammered all 3 seasons, and I have never been happier with my choices. It is a fantastic...
Can I make sure that you know there is a 4th season?
Yes. Yes. No, I'm sorry. You know what? I'm looking at Amazon. I'm looking at the Google thing on it, and I'm like, why does it say 3 seasons? Because it is 4. I was like, yeah, the first 2 seasons are in the park, and the second 2 seasons are the sci-fi ones, like the out in the world, like, which we'll talk about that. I have feelings. I have feelings that need to be expressed on a podcast. So,
listen, at this point in time and a culture, a podcast is where we all go to express our feelings because we can't do that with our loved ones or our friends.
This is oh man, yes, absolutely. That's so real, and I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole because this is not a private conversation, and I keep that in mind.
For all intents and purposes, it kind of is, because it's you in your room, it's me in my apartment alone. We're having a conversation across the airwaves. It just so happens that thousands of people are listening to us as well, but they're also our close personal friends.
That's true. It's you know what, honestly, I had somebody come up to me the other day. Sorry, I'm going to digress really quickly. I had somebody come up to me the other day and just said, I love how like straightforward and honest you are when you like give talks and are on podcasts. And I was like, oh no, like what have I said? What did I not know I should say? How candid was I by accident? But it's the only way I'm wired, so that's
it is the weirdest thing when someone recognizes you. Like, we're not famous, but I think the weirdest one for me was I got recognized from my voice in a cinema queue in LA.
You do have a distinctive voice, though. So
I'm told. I mean, it's difficult to tell for you as an individual, but it has happened quite a bit, and the one in LA when I was on holiday was the weirdest one. I'm like, this is the other side of the world. What are you? We don't know each
You've
other.
got reach. Hello to the other side of the world listeners. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you. No, I love knowing people are out there. It's fantastic. I was the last time it happened, I was at a big drag night, and I was wearing like a bouffant and crazy makeup and Elvis glasses. And someone came up to me and they were like, "Are you Jen Handorf?" I was like, I'm not sure I want to answer that honestly right now, but yes. Hi, how are you?
That is hardcore fans.
Yeah. Well,
Cherish
it was funny.
them.
Yeah, it was. I love them. I love it every day, and I appreciate people enjoying watching things, regardless of what they think about me. I like them enjoying my work. So, and you know, now on to Mr. Yul Brynner and his like hardcore charisma.
Listen, Mr. Yul Brynner has his own section in this conversation.
Okay. But good.
And this is part of the kind of an extension of my previous question, but like, where do you think Westworld sits in the pop culture or sci-fi horror canon? Because I think the show has perhaps made it bigger. The show now is more well known and is more recent, obviously. But do you think that people know Westworld?
I don't know. I think people used to. I think in the 90s people knew Westworld, but I think it's getting to be a bit of a deeper cut. Maybe younger audiences haven't connected with it so much. Maybe because of the TV show. And, you know, unless somebody felt driven to go back and watch it. The film's older than I am. So, you know, things disappear over time. Thousands of films come out a year. But I think as far as its influence on things that people do know, I think, you know, talking about Terminator, I think you can't watch Yul Brynner walk through those hallways without thinking of Arnold Schwarzenegger and his power walk, or even both of them. The second movie, God, I'm terrible with names.
Future World?
Yes, exactly. Thank you. His Terminator walk and Yul Brynner's walk are like incredibly similar. I think the robots under human skin, again, is a heavy Terminator reference. Obviously, Michael Crichton pulled this same trick out of the bag for Jurassic Park, which is such a hilarious, like, reversioning of your own work that, like, but it's a banger. So, like, it's super, he gets away with it 100%.
So actually, on Michael Crichton, you mentioned him before that you were a super fan of Jurassic Park, and he's a weird one because Michael Crichton was a person who had a real life job. He was a doctor. He graduated from Harvard Medical School. He went to Harvard, and then he's like, actually, fuck medicine. I'm gonna write sci-fi books.
I love him.
And so, where do you stand on Michael Crichton? Where does he stand in the culture? And kind of, this is his, I believe, directorial debut, feature film-wise. He'd done some TV before. Yeah, it's his feature film
debut. He'd done a TV movie. You know, he was seen as a sort of science fiction writer. I think I hate to say I'm an apologist, but I really am kind of a Michael Crichton apologist. I think his work gets dismissed as camp sometimes, and people just leave it with Jurassic Park at the door and forget to look at his other work. But he's genuinely great fun. Like, he's tremendous fun as filmmaker, as storytellers go. And mostly his books are very much those books that you get in the airport. Which is actually, that's how I came to Michael Crichton. So I was born in 1983. I obviously didn't watch Westworld when it came out because it was made in 1973, or it came out in 1973. But what I did do was when the novel The Congo came out in 1995, which is written by Michael Crichton, my 12-year-old self ripped through that book like it was priceless gold. Like it was diamonds from a mountainside. And if you'll allow me the metaphor, being guarded by an ancient beast. Anyway, but yeah, like I love Congo. I have a deep love for Congo, and that may delegitimize everything else I say from here, but I do not care. I love Congo. It's a great fun movie. Everything about it is amazing. Stop eating my sesame seed cake is a line that will never not make me laugh. So I actually came to Michael Crichton from his books and from Congo, and then into, obviously I knew Jurassic Park, but I didn't know the book of it so much because I was 10. But yeah, and it's really, he's one of those writers, filmmakers who, if people start to hear his films, they're like, oh my god, why don't I know him as like a top tier filmmaker? Because you get into things like Twister, you get into things like I mean, if people remember Disclosure,
I love Disclosure.
Yeah, like I know you love you some Demi Moore, so that's Michael. Which Demi again, does. Disclosure to Westworld, what an incredible span of writing. Like they're not the same thing at all.
Well, I will admit I haven't read his books that he's written, but even researching this and seeing, did not remember that Disclosure was based on one of his books, but you can see this strain of themes that are constantly appearing over and over again in the stories. Even if we just take the stories that have been adapted into films and have then been expanded, Jurassic World and Westworld are very intertwined thematically. They're basically all about the same thing. It's about the hubris that goes into creating technology, the possibility of artificial life, free will, whether that exists or not, and even Disclosure has a real techie vibe to it as well. It's about are we creating technology to help us, or are we imprisoning ourselves with tech? In Disclosure, to be fair, at least in the film, it is a filing system through a VR filing system, which I'll never forget. So it's not always the
technology
high-tech.
In this in a minute. Yeah, he does this technology aspect, and it's great to include him in the sci-fi season because his handling of technology is brilliant. Another one, which is a film that I'm not clear on why I watched this film a lot. I feel like it may have been on American television at one point. But Rising Sun, which is the Sean Connery, Wesley Snipes vehicle. And it's got some problematic, white guy writing Japan stuff in it. But it's got some really interesting, doctored footage at the core of a mystery. And it's got, it's not full blown CSI enhance, but it's sort of a precursor to that. And it's great fun. So this is something else, we'll come to it, but the way that he has sort of semi-predicted things, or the way that he has imagined how things would develop, I want to talk about before we get to the end of the conversation. But yes, I don't think Crichton gets the love that he deserves. I think his individual projects do. But then people fail to remember that his body of work is really great fun. And particularly, I think as that sort of American filmmakers go, he's a really good example of just great fun work, basically.
Oh, great ideas. And let's get into the weeds with Westworld itself a little bit, because this is one that he decided not to do as a novel, but rather wanted to do as a film. And yes. How do you think he handles technology in Westworld?
So I imagine I read that as well, that he said when his producer said, well, do you want to do a book first? He said, no, I really see this as a visual project. I thought about that a lot because I was trying to understand what he felt was so visual that couldn't be communicated on the page. And I imagine it really is the technology, because for us now as an audience, and the film has almost aged better in that sense, for us now as an audience, we understand the shorthand for all of this technology. We understand robot vision, we understand pixels, we understand security monitors, we understand all of this stuff. Half of the stuff in that science lab was just oscilloscopes, which I love that. I love that kind of camp sci-fi. But there's some stuff in it that actually exists natively to our daily lives now that nobody knew what a pixel was in 1972. How you describe that? It's a group of pixels with the image broken. Nobody's going to know what you're talking about. So I think that's the reason why he felt like it needed to be a visual. I mean, that's complete conjecture, and I'd be really curious to hear what he says on the subject. But but the notion that he presents so many novel concepts that to try and describe it would be ineffective and not literary.
Do you know, I was thinking about the same thing when I was rewatching the film. I was like, what about this needed to be a film? Because I think it's a huge compliment for any creative mind to be able to say, this is a song, this is a play, this is an opera, this is a film, this is a novel, this is an article, whatever it is, a podcast. And do you know the image that I think is actually the reason why it needed to be a film? Again, similar to you, pure conjecture, but I did find it quite chilling. And I love your point about the technology. On paper, it's very dull. Like, how do you even describe it when we don't have that in the cultural imagination? But the deep uncanniness for me came from this one image in the film where we go into the underbelly, like the fixing station where all of the androids who have malfunctioned or who have been killed go to be repaired. And it's just these stacks of bodies, but they're not human. And they're really stiff. And there's a horse, there's a dog, there's a duck there somewhere. And they're just laying in this really unnaturally stiff position on examination tables, and people are going around them. They're like opening this face, fixing this little cable inside a foot, whatever. It is so instantly communicated that these are not humans, and I think you could not communicate that so intensely and create such a sense of unease in one shot, basically, or in one tracking shot as you can.
In one moment on the page.
Yeah. And to echo what you were saying before, it's also this choice of, we're not going to put a bunch of like robot looking, mascots on the tables. It's clearly just actors. Like, these are just people. This is human skin. This is a human leg. We're just shooting in a different way, and the context makes it chilling because we're going to add a little like super glue, a little cable coming out of the toe. But it's not, these are robots designed to look like humans, which makes it really uncanny when we see other characters treat their bodies like they're objects.
Absolutely. And it's I think uncanny is a key word there. Like, there's I think it's difficult to write uncanny because it's a slight subtle difference that you almost can't, like, it's almost undescribable, which makes it difficult to write. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And how do you think, talking about the robots wearing human skin, what do you think about the way that the robots are portrayed and treated in Westworld?
Well, so there's a lot of story that comes from this, isn't there? Because you get, and I think the film and the TV series are actually different in some subtleties, the way they do this. Because in the movie, they make it very clear that you can tell who the robots are. That the hands are different, and they definitely walk differently, and it's just that they look correct. They look human. And that was one of the points that I think was science fiction then, but is no longer science fiction. Now, they wouldn't sound human. They would sound like a truck moving. But animatronics exist, and silicon and other materials exist that could make something that was passable as a human other than the sound, I think. I think we'd instantly know that. And we've seen ChatGPT, obviously, with, even that, since the TV series has come out, has massively advanced this kind of thinking. So in the movie, they are treated as animatronics. There's not any real attachment. There is a moment at the end where Peter Martin, for the lead character, mistakes a robot for a human briefly. But it's not really extended. He doesn't get any grand feelings for her. He just has a moment of humanity for her and then realizes she's a robot. That he was confused once again. But there's not, as in the TV series, these deep emotional connections and lifelong relationships.
Yes. And existential questions.
Yeah. So they are completely different vehicles in the two projects. And it's one of the reasons that I think people should watch both. Because they are treated completely separately. And I think the message, you know, I have a tendency to give things a read from a feminist lens, because obviously that's my experience. We know in the TV series what it means about consent and control and autonomy and all these kind of things. There are some of those themes in the film as well, where we see, you know, there's a moment where the two men decide, are they going to go rob a bank or are they going to go sleep with the prostitutes? And, you know, he just says, oh, this will be more fun. To go sleep with the prostitutes. And I think there's a thread to that we see briefly in that sequence with those characters that does mirror some of those same themes. However, the majority of it is much more Jaws should have closed the theme park. You know, the Jurassic Park of it is mostly what the film does, where it's, oh God, the machines are rebelling. There's not a humanity in the machines. So
no, it is literally a malfunction. It's a technical error.
He predicts computer viruses, but I love how incredulous the scientists are that there could be a computer virus. It's amazing. They say, what? Like this is spread through several of the robots of the park, almost like a human virus.
It's a disease of machinery.
Exactly. Honestly, they're so close. And that's some sci-fi that I love, is where you can look back at this older sci-fi and see how it almost actually predicts where the world goes.
But that's imagination, isn't it? That's one of the things I love about sort of sci-fi and tech-based horror films as well. And, you know, just to make one point, and I've always thought this, but I think I've really cemented my opinion on remakes. And Westworld is a perfect example, which is this TV series and the film have almost nothing in common except the title and the basic premise. I think we should do more of this. Take something that had a good idea at the heart of it and explode that idea in all sorts of different directions. You don't need to recreate key moments or beloved moments from the original IP. Just take the essential idea and go wild with it. And I think Westworld is like one of the best examples, because it is essentially like a 70s B-movie sci-fi, quite low budget, quite prescient and interesting in many ways. But, you know, you don't watch it and go, oh, this is as good as T2. It's not.
No, it's not cinema.
No, it's not. But it's a great idea. And then you get, with more resource, with more technology, with more budget, and with a completely fresh take on it, you're like, what can we do with this central premise of a theme park populated by robots that we designed? What can we do with that goes beyond what we did in 1973?
Well, and it feels like that framework, the story of a theme park that goes mad, has become a part of our sort of human mythology at this point as well. Like it's if you made a story like that, people go, oh yeah, it's one of those, like where the characters at the theme park come to life and go rebel against their creators. It's one of those kind of stories. But this is really the first one. Like, you know, I'm sure there's some deep cuts and something from Russia that's probably done it before this. But it really genuinely, it cemented this kind of idea. And even when you get to things like Cabin in the Woods, like it's obviously had a huge impact on like the controlling behind the scenes and the way those areas are depicted. So yeah, it holds up on its own, and it creates a world that is open to explore and could be a part of the TV series. Like it doesn't feel like, even though they're not the same story, it does feel like this could be one of the times the robots rebelled when the park first opened that they allude to in the TV series.
And let's talk a little bit about the park premise, the park gone wild. Because Westworld is a name of a luxury vacation spot. And then there's Roman World and a couple of others. So it's
a very Disney adjacent like philosophy.
Totally.
Like.
So, and I found it really chilling rewatching the film that, you know, it is essentially a trip gone wrong to a theme park. And they're very, very clear that this is a transactional luxury experience. There's a moment very early on where someone, I guess, kills some robots and he's like, "Oh, I killed 6 people." And someone else goes around and is like, "That you didn't kill anyone. That's not people." And he's like, "Oh, let's go even crazier." But how do the visitors treat these fake worlds and the quote unquote fake people that work there?
Well, so this is something that I find really interesting because it supposes that given the opportunity, people would want to go shooting other people. That is something that they would derive pleasure from. And I think that's a very interesting assumption to make about people. The TV series spends a lot more time building up someone who doesn't want to participate in these things at first and then finds themselves appealing to their darker nature. It still kind of gets there in the end. But I think it's a really interesting premise that as humans, given a consequence-free scenario, very Purge-like in this sense. Given a consequence-free scenario, we would want to go shoot real live-looking people out in a place. We would derive pleasure from that the same way we would from a video game in which we were doing it. We would want to think we were shooting a real person. And I find that a very bleak picture of humanity, but it is also fundamentally the premise of this film, and it just blasts past it right at the start. So,
it does get picked up by the show, though. It's pretty much the whole premise of the first season of the TV show.
Yeah. The show spends way more time on this philosophy, but and the concept of it. But yeah, the film is like, oh yeah, no, you guys would all want to come do this, right? This is chill. Everybody wants to do this. Cool, great. We're all gonna spend a lot of money to go pretend to kill people, but for real, because it's the reality of it that makes it enjoyment and not the fantasy of it, which I think is something else. Because they refer a lot to children's play, to children playing cowboys and Indians. Now, children don't play ancient Rome. I'm going to point that out. That's not something...
Even in the ad, they're like, enjoy the decadent morals of ancient Rome.
Exactly. They're basically like, you can... But then that's kind of the... I guess it's more like the luxury space, isn't it? They're selling it more on the luxury. And then medieval, it's like, who's is this meant to appeal to women who wanted to play princesses, or is this...
Well, I think I was thinking about this actually. So the Westworld element of it is very clearly like, you know, it's the American tale. Yeah.
And it's boys, cowboys, and Indians shoot 'em up guns. Like,
yeah, it's
boys
like
will be boys type
it's
stuff.
all wrapped in like a really, I don't know, like commercialized version of nostalgia. So the Westworld stuff really makes sense as part of the American Imaginarium. But then the medieval world and the Roman world, it's sort of like, remember when we did not have morals, when we did not have Christianity?
Yes.
That's Roman world. Go enjoy these violent delights before, you know, we discovered how to behave ourselves because of Christ. And then
it's much
medieval
more the
world.
Purge. Yeah.
Yeah. And medieval world, I think it's like, because you guys, I'm generalizing all of the United States here. Do you guys love a novelty medieval style restaurant?
I've been to one of those.
Yeah.
It's fucking weird. Cable Guy, like made everybody. I don't know if people went to it before they saw Jim Carrey doing Cable Guy. But you bet I'm going to medieval times after I see Cable Guy. And I think I got food poisoning. But like,
so you don't go to medieval times for the cuisine.
Yeah, classic. But giant turkey legs and like Ren fairs. I don't know if you guys do Ren fairs in Europe or if it's an American fantasy thing.
I have no idea.
Because I did remember like Renaissance fairs sort of came up in the 90s as a big fun activity. I'm a big nerd, so like that's maybe the way I'm describing it is not how other people see it. But yeah, there is a fascination, I think, for that ye olde times and imagining it to be something it isn't. But as you say, nostalgia. But I kind of think those places, I think Rome and medieval times are there, not because they suit the themes and the structure of the narrative, but because this isn't a perfect film. And they just sit outside it, and it's just two other themed places that they could think about because they wanted to travel through, and it's sort of a Disney World type place, and Disney World has different places in it, and what else could they do that was like an experience that they had sets for? So it does feel a bit punctuative. There's something interesting to me about the production of this film, and I think it really shows. I think it really, really shows. Michael Crichton heavily cut the ending of the film, and there's a lot of scenes that got removed. They shot it in 30 days, which means that you're not shooting everything exactly as you'd like to, that you're going quite quickly. And so I think there are some places in the film where what looks like it could be considered a strange choice is probably making do in a way. And in particular, I think the ending is something, and I know we'll come to that in a bit, but the ending he recut quite heavily, and that is where I think the film loses its charm a little bit, is when it becomes a straight up chase scene. But yeah, I think it's because of all the time he spent re-editing it, because they had such a short time to film it.
And before we come to the ending, you mentioned him before. I want to make some time to talk about Yul Brynner.
Yul.
Because for a film, the film's marketing, promotion, I would even say the whole thing kind of really heavily relies on him, despite the fact that he, I think, only says one word during the entire film. Because it is sort of oddly devoid of movie stars.
Oh, yeah. Well, my research tells me he was cast 2 days prior to production, and that he did it because he had an outstanding tax bill.
Yeah, so he did it for the check. Go off.
So that's, yeah. So I love that even on a film where he's like, oh, I'll do this first time. I'm Yul Brynner. I'm doing this first time feature directors. Stupid sci-fi movie. I'm playing a reworking of my character from one of my favorite, most incredible films in this weird, cheap sci-fi. So I can't imagine he was like delighted to be there, because it's his character from The Magnificent Seven whose costume is based on.
Yeah. So give us a little bit more of a primer. Like, who is Yul Brynner?
Now the thing is, Yul Brynner for me is the King of Siam from The King and I, in which, as a kid, this movie would come on TV and you'd sit and you'd watch it, and it was a super, super charming, really family friendly, but very of the time as far as depictions of other countries go, musical. And I just, that was Yul Brynner. I never knew him as a cowboy, which he very much was in things like The Magnificent Seven and other films. But he really must have fallen on hard times shortly before this film. He's such a babe to me, though, and I really hope that's not just me. I don't I'm suddenly feeling like I show my cards.
He is, after I rewatched the film, I went down another rabbit hole of like young Yul Brynner, because he was a Russian immigrant. He shortened his name, and he is such an intense aura about him.
Yes.
That's the kindest way. That's the most PG way I can put it. Like, this man walks like he's got a permanent erection. That's what every time he's on screen, I'm like, whoa, calm down, Yul. Calm down, sir.
He walks with the confidence of a man who could call upon an erection with a moment's notice. Like, do we swear in this podcast?
Of course he can swear in this podcast.
Yul Brynner fucks. He definitely fucks. I think I've said that about other people, but he's definitely and I think it's such a funny thing because, as and it shows the female gaze and the shift in how we watch things as well, because that's not why he was cast. His character doesn't play sexy. There's nothing about it. But if you look at the men in this film, if you look at the men in this film, it's a couple of 1970s babes. You've got Josh Brolin and Yul Brynner.
James Brolin.
James Brolin.
Dad.
Yeah, the son. I've done that on accident. James Brolin, rather. Basically the same guy, just with older hair. But yeah, like it's such a female gaze film, but it's not at all for a female audience. So that's quite fun, I think, on a rewatch. And then obviously you get into the TV series, and there's a lot of there's eye candy for everyone as far as that goes. If you're trauma informed. And don't watch it too closely. But
I do kind of love that Yul Brynner's character, which is not really a character. It's more of a caricature. You know, he doesn't even get a name. It's a gunslinger. His whole thing is that he's Yul Brynner, and he means business. That's his whole thing. He becomes sort of obsessed with murdering these two 70s dude bros. And what I genuinely love about the film is that it's not trying to overcomplicate itself. It's like, listen, the robots malfunction. They want to kill people. But Yul Brynner's character is not that just he randomly wants to kill whatever guests are around. No. He goes out of his way to kill these specific two guys. He's like, I've decided that I hate you specifically, and I want to end your life. And I don't care.
You in particular.
Fuck you in particular. I don't care how many steps I need to take, how many times I have to personally die, but I will get you.
The desert. Yeah, he's like, well, and it is like and it's great because I suppose they give us a little bit of, they shoot him in the beginning, and so because they shot him in the beginning, he is locked in on them. But it is mission critical, and it is that Terminator thing though. I don't think you can look at Terminator and separate it from Yul Brynner and Westworld.
I completely agree.
There's the locked in aspect of it, I can't think wasn't in part inspired by that character. And I love how they did the eyes, and I'm sure
it's very subtle.
And I can't think it's just light. I wonder, I imagine it must be some kind of contact as well, because it is so circular, and it seems to move when their eye moves rather than just reflecting in the eye. But it's a great effect. It's an absolutely brilliant effect. I don't understand the logic of it not being continuous, like why it appears or disappears. But
don't question it, Jen.
Exactly. Like,
it's
fine.
not there to be questioned.
I'm fine with it. It doesn't all need to fit up so nicely. It's still fun to look at. And
I know you wanted to talk about the ending, which was a little bit more protracted. What did you think of the ending?
Well, and it's funny because I think the movie and the TV series have this in common in a way, is it feels like it starts to meander within itself, and like it's already made its point, but it has a runtime to fill.
Yep. That makes complete sense.
And I think they both kind of suffer from this. It's not fun to engage with it, but it does feel as though it has already done what it needed to do. A little repetitive, which again, as I said, he cut a lot out, and it is hard if you shoot something on a 30-day schedule. It means you've already made it as lean as possible, and so when you start to cut things out, it does affect the pacing and the flow and the mood. So it may be there were things that he cut that would have re-energized us to carry on that a little longer, or maybe he just gave us grace and realized it was too long and he just could have gone further. You know, it's I think by the time we're going down the storm drain in Roman world, and he's climbing down a ladder there, you suddenly realize, oh, this is very cat and mouse at this point, because it's just shots of them following each other through the same space at that point. And it's and then they did do 2 different endings for this film, so that's whenever someone has done 2 different endings for a film, it makes me aware that they're not completely sold on the ending themselves. So I think that's the situation we ended up in. You know, I think he created a fantastic concept, which he's executed in a really fun way. he didn't know how to end it perfectly. Okay, still a fun film. It meanders a bit. It doesn't go great, but it's still worth a watch. And yeah, go Yul.
And before I move on to the Westworld series, have you ever seen the sequel, Future World?
Yes. So, funnily enough, I feel like Future World sets up the series more straight on.
Okay, how so?
So, when you see the changing rooms in the 1973 movie versus the TV series, this is a different facility. In the movie, the customer experience is like a YMCA. It looks like it's a very funny, when they come in to get dressed up and everything, they've spent all this money on the incredible park, but where you come to get your trousers is basically like the sale rack at a charity shop. Like, it's very, very thin and very poorly presented. Whereas in the TV series, it's like you're at Gucci. Like, you're like, this is the nicest store in the mall. Like, I can't shop there. I don't have enough money to shop there. That is one thing I'm sure of. So Future Worlds kind of smooths over that bougie transition of the facility, if that makes sense.
So it's if Westworld is like Poundland,
Exactly.
Future World is Zara, and Westworld, the TV series, is Gucci.
Exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
we got it. We got the transition.
Exactly. But still, I do think they could all exist in the same timeline, which I love. And there have been other things that people have tried with this IP, I suppose.
They tried a TV series before the 2016 one.
Yeah, exactly. And it's sort of, I think it's a difficult thing to get right. And it's why even within the film and within the TV series, it has things it really gets right, and then places where it is a bit of a damn squib. But I think because of what it gets right, it's always fun to engage with.
So let's get into the Gucci series properly.
Gucci.
The Gucci version of this conversation. How does the series take the central premise of the robot-manned violent theme park for adults of Westworld from the 70s and update it and completely expand it?
So, it's worth noting, there was a kind of version of this TV series, and then the TV series was pitched for a number of years, and that they were always going after these sort of prestige directors. Like, it was with Quentin Tarantino at one point. So it ends up being done by Jonathan Nolan, who obviously has a very specific aesthetic, and I think that has massively supported this film. I don't know if you watched the series Person of Interest at all.
I haven't. I know of it, but I've never seen it.
You can see the transition and the elevation from like his style and how he works with tech and surveillance and CGI and character development and intrigue, and I think he does a great job with it. I think it's a totally different approach. It's like, oil painting and watercolor. They're both artwork, but they're totally different mediums. And I think that is very true of this. The TV series has time to explore these themes that really elevate it. And, while I'm happily singing the praises of Yul Brynner, like, my God, you got Anthony Hopkins, you got Ed Harris, you've got, like, and that's before you even get into the James Marsden and Evan Rachel Wood event, Thandie Newton, like, the Luke Hemsworth. Like, you can't stop talking about the amazing cast in this show. So I think it takes that IP and it takes it to that high budget TV place, which it fits really nicely in.
And it is, and particularly during this time when a lot of these cable networks were commissioning, they wanted high-end, very bingeable, very high-budget properties. And this one is, at the time even, it felt so incredibly thematically ambitious, visually slick, stunning. Like even now, if you watch it, the way that it's filmed, the way that the technology is filmed, the way that these future worlds are filmed, kind of once we get into the second part of the 4-season arc, is really gorgeous. So the money is all there on the screen. It's impeccable. And it was this mix of, we have these high conceptual artistic ambitions. We also have very high, I imagine, commercial targets. So we're going to put our money there and we're going to promote the shit out of this show. It's going to reach as many eyeballs as possible. But also, it is of this time when TV was really seducing actors who were perhaps not being properly used by films and by filmmakers into giving them really long-running, complicated roles. Like, Tandiva Newton was constantly misused by films. Like, she was always the beautiful, love interest, and she finally got to play someone for a very extended period of time who goes through a lot of arcs. And Jeffrey Wright, phenomenal actor who is now getting his flowers. And I remember feeling like Bernard in Westworld was like one of the first times where he was being given a leading role where he was chewing on it. And Evan Rachel Wood, same. Like, she had really come up in the early 2000s in film, but I think she's really made her mark on television so much more. And the character of Dolores is one of the big bads of the series. So one of the absolute central characters who absolutely does not just goes through just unexplainable arcs throughout the 4 seasons. But like, Evan is definitely one of those actresses where I'm like, you were always so great in movies, and then they tried to make you into a Scarlett Johansson type, and that is just not the sort of actress she is. So I've really loved to see her thrive in, she was great in Mildred Pierce, the Todd Haynes TV adaptation. She's great in this. And, she's doing other amazing work to do with activism. And when she was on TV with Westworld, it was just amazing to get to see her every week. And even revisiting it, I'm like, I don't think they had the scripts for all the seasons kind of ready in advance. But
no way.
My God,
I don't think they thought they were going to get to 4th season.
100%.
It shows
but
a little bit.
My God, does she carry this show as well?
Well, and her arc, even as ridiculous as it becomes towards the end, is what carries you through. She is the star of the show, hands down. And it's debatable whether she starts that way, but I absolutely agree with you. The fact that these actors are given so many different characters to play within the same space, and it means they can spend time with them, and they can explore them, and they can think about them from different perspectives, and they really do the work, and you really, really believe every inch of these performances, and it's necessary to the crux of the story, because if we could guess whether they were robot or human, then the whole thing would fall apart. Yeah. So they all have to act and perform impeccably tightly. That every tick has to be when it's supposed to be for whether or not you're this character or that character or this whatever. And it's one of those movies that you can go back, TV series you can go back and rewatch and realize that, oh wow, this was always embedded all the way through. That's incredible.
And I think one of the themes that it definitely explores much more deliberately is the idea of free will. So it's not just this, the sci-fi premise of, oh, it's robots that rebel and start killing humans. No, it's robots who awaken. It's the idea of robots thinking for themselves and discovering, even debating with other humans or other robots, whether they have free will at all, or even free will as a concept anyway. This is possibly for some people, it'll be an annoyingly philosophical show. But what do you make about some of the key things, some of the key themes that they explore throughout it.
Okay, so from a personal perspective, I find myself deeply embedded in simulation theory, which if people aren't yet aware of it, it's the idea that as we approach more and more advanced technology, the likelihood that we are unaware that we are in a simulation is ever increasing, as is the likelihood that we could be products of that simulation. So I think this TV series plays with that so beautifully. It just lays it all out there, really. It's fairly central, the question of, can we choose our own behavior? And it's portrayed through the programmed robots. There's a lot of discussion about programming. And the show itself really sticks to the literal programming of computers for the first 2 seasons, and then it flips the script, so to speak, and begins to say, but because people are predictable, you can program people. And now, now we see it from that perspective. So it does give the full gamut of simulation theory, basically, which I'm on board with. I'm increasingly certain that's where we're headed anyway. So I very much enjoyed this documentary, Westworld. Yes.
Do you find? I know there's been online, and even as I was watching, I sort of fell off after the second season at the beginning of the third one. And it does feel like a very clean break, thematically, even stylistically. What do you think, kind of, how would you describe the concerns of the first 2 seasons versus the third and final season?
As in the themes and the sort of what they're covering.
Yes.
So if it's not been made clear to this point, I really enjoy the first 2 seasons. I find the second 2 seasons a bit of a slog and a little schlocky, if visually enjoyable. We begin to lose that really brilliant, tightly knit, threaded, well-connected, very pleasingly executed, interlinked narrative. And it starts to just sort of, I guess it jumps the shark a little bit, where it just starts to sort of go, what if they're a robot? Fooled you. What if everybody's a robot? And it
what if we put 2 robots together and suddenly Tessa Thompson is Evan Rachel Wood, but also they're not. They're a third thing.
They're a different third robot. And it does sort of stop following its own rules and introducing new rules to where, and you get a little bit of this towards the end of the second season, where, because they keep dying and coming back and keep dying and coming back and keep dying and coming back, it begins to lose its impact. And there begins to, the peril sort of diminishes. And you sort of begin to realize that, well, they'll write them out of it with a new rule. We just have to see what the rule is going to be. And there's a pleasure to that. There's a pleasure to having those new turns revealed to you. But when you lose the peril, it sort of deflates the tension, and the drive. But it's still fun. But yeah, so those first 2 seasons, very much philosophy and lovely, tightly knitted, intriguing story. And then the second 2 seasons were all about Evan Rachel Wood's character, I think, taking over the world.
Pretty much. But also, and I don't want to spoil details of the series too much for people who might want to watch it, but it is a bleak as hell ending. It is basically, not only are we in a simulation, but the robots do in fact inherit the Earth, and everyone dies.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like, literally, everyone dies. It's like, the robots, the humans, we all die. The only one that is happy is Ed Harris, because he discovers that he is in fact was the villain all along.
Yeah.
It is, his whole arc is the Taylor Swift arc of like, oh wait, I'm the problem, it's me. Yeah. And then once he realizes he's the problem, he's gonna be like, I'm gonna go big. if I'm the villain, I'm gonna be the best villain there is.
Am I the villain? Yeah, it's very, yeah, absolutely. And this is the TV series revels in its villains. It's got fantastic villains. They're gorgeous. Everybody's villainousness is delicious all the way through. So, you know, you can, you know, I know I'm crapping on the last 2 seasons a little bit, but I still think they're worth it. And I've struggled to watch only part of a series if I'm committed to watching the whole thing. Like, I really, if I've gotten to 2 seasons and there's 4 seasons and I'm halfway through 3, I'm really going to finish it. I'm going to finish it. I'm a good soldier.
I do love the, you know, as messy as it got in the last 2 seasons, especially kind of because I think the twists that were delivered at the end of the first season were so well done and so well delivered that it couldn't live up to those same twists. It needed to overcomplicate it. It had kind of the same problem that Lost had, where it's like it created so many mysteries that it then ran out of time and space to solve all the mysteries in a coherent way.
Yeah.
Whereas the first season is so tight. It is like a much more expansive version of this one idea at the center of Westworld, and really breaks up and really makes really terrifying but also really slick the idea of a park that is designed to essentially indulge in our violent delights or dark desires. But there's the thing that it ended up circling around a lot, which is why I appreciate the series with all of its faults. And it kind of goes beyond this very simple fear of the machines. You know, it's not just about, are the robots going to turn evil? Are the robots going to be uncontrollable? Is a switch going to go off and they're going to want to murder all the humans? Which was basically Westworld 1973 and a lot of tech horror as well. But here, it really gets into it has so much time for basically the hosts, the androids, having conversations with one another about what it means to be a machine and what it means to be human, what it means to be alive. It's not that interested in particular human characters. It's more like, what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to be alive if you've been created? What does it mean to create life? Is artificial life the same as life? Do they hold the same value? Should they?
I would also bring that to and I don't remember the blonde actor who's the naive one when he first gets to the park.
Tallulah Riley?
The guy is he playing he's playing young Hedda Harris.
Oh, Jimmy Simpson.
Yes, thank you.
I love him. Jimmy Simpson. One of the McPoyle brothers. I'll always know him as that.
Like, giving some great breadth to his performances that he can go comedy to drama like this, because he was fantastic. I think he gives a very interesting outside the robots version of this, because he isn't living Westworld to its fullest. He is being given all these opportunities to live life and isn't taking them. And I think later when we get into, later seasons and we see a character incarcerated, Peter Mullen's character incarcerated in a room, and is he a robot? Is he not a robot? And he can't live his life, but he thinks he's living his life and he wants out. I think there is, throughout the film, real themes of what does it mean to live your best life? And does it mean being financially successful? Like the owners of Westworld, who end up miserable and dead. Does it mean living on a farm with your ma and pa and waiting for your cowboy to come home? But never going off to the edge to paint the views that you want to? I think it gives us a real breadth of questioning whether life is living up to your potential or being comfortable. And to be honest, other perspectives as well. But yeah, every character gets to ask themselves, am I living my life the way I want to? Or am I living the way that is imposed upon me by either my programmers or the culture in which I exist?
Yeah. And there's a point where, I think it's Dolores who says to a human, where she says the free will does exist, but it's just fucking hard. So even if you're programmed and you're trying to awaken against your programming, or you're a person and you're just doing the things that are expected of you, what's the difference, really?
This is deeply, deeply true. I was talking about simulation theory with a philosopher friend of mine the other day, and he was saying how it aligns with a lot of Eastern philosophy, and it's not actually far off from a lot of more ancient stuff. And I was opining to him that, you know, I had a project I worked on last year that I said, man, I wish I could have a do-over on that project. I wish I could go back and just do it again. And his response was brilliant, and I think it speaks to all of this, is he said, but you do get to go back and do it again. You just have to recognize when that same situation presents itself to you once more and decide to make a different choice that time. And it's the self-awareness to see it being there and make the different choice that is the real question of identity and predetermination and all of this. Are we destined to continue to make the same choices that disappoint us, or do we have the ability to change ourselves?
Damn, Jen.
Dude, it was a hardcore convo. He was one of my lecturers at film school a billion years ago. We still stay in touch, and he drops banger after banger, honestly. Like,
oh my god. And before we wrap up, because this is, after all, a horror podcast.
Yes.
I did want to ask you, kind of overall, with both the films and the series, how do you think horror, or, you know, our broad idea of horror, how does that intersect with technology in the Westworlds?
I think it's the fragility of this barrier between safe and unsafe. And I think it's in how we have all become, and I think it applies to now very deeply, we've all become very relaxed and very complacent with how we use technology and the control we give technology. And it doesn't come for free, surrendering that control for convenience. And I think this film plays with that very beautifully. And in particular, the horror of what people are calling AI, large language models, coming into play and you know, replacing people in the creative industries. It becomes even more interesting, you know, is all someone wants for entertainment a conversation tree, or do we crave something deeper from human connection?
I don't know.
Right?
Who can tell? Listeners, it's up to you. Tell me.
Who can know? Exactly. Well, and this is the you know, I think that's what my friend was saying. We get to choose whether we're satisfied for the branching story line of life, or whether we want to do something outside of that. Unfortunately, it is much easier to take the path of least resistance. You know, it's all of that stuff about you know, change is hard, comfort is easy, all of these kind of things. I think it's one of the reasons why I found it such a comfort watch, the TV series binge, is that if you're not having an existential crisis right now, then you've probably already had one and massively disassociated. So it's a great binge for a broken world, I think. And then in the last 2 seasons, it just goes like full silly sci-fi, and that's a lot of fun as well.
It goes real,
it's
like
pudding. It's pudding at the end.
Yeah. But I think and it's the same sort of feeling I had when rewatching the film, but I wouldn't really call Westworld the series kind of a horror TV show, but I think the thing that I always find really unsettling about this is the cleanliness of it. It's how everything is so slick. It's too slick.
And you know, I think that's the J.J. Abrams aesthetic. I can't, and you know, I mentioned the creator. J.J. Abrams is one of the executive producers, and I think, you know, I think we should just count ourselves lucky that it wasn't smothered in blue streak filter. But
well, it's almost like it's similar to the uncanniness of the original Crichton film, right? It's like when you see these body parts bloodless, completely devoid of humanity and just being stacked like like tools, right? Like things that need to be done in the same way that it's like post-it notes, right? There's no difference. There's just really expensive materials. And I think there's this element where we get to see in a lot of scenes delivered very casually, these robots having these big existential questions about free will and life and the meaning of it and the ability to make a choice or not. And they're just sitting there and they have a slick metallic skeleton and just an actor's face from the neck up, or their face opens up or disintegrates. And it's not kind of played as, a Wicked Witch of the West kind of melting situation. It's more like, no, this is function. This is how these beings function. And there's not blood in the same way as we think of blood in horror movies or splatter movies or gore. This is what I mean. It's like a very clinical, very metallic, slick form of horror that I find, if anything, even more unsettling, because we expect bodies to be messy and for blood and for guts and for things to be weird inside. And when those insides, like when our encasing is ruptured in any way, it's like it gets messy. It's gonna be it's gonna be weird. There's gonna be fluids everywhere. Gross. The fact when that does not happen, it's something weird. Something off is happening. Like in every single sci-fi horror movie, if a robot gets cut and they don't bleed red or they don't bleed at all, yeah, it's Stepford Wives, it's Alien, whatever. It's like, oh no, your blood is white. That's not good.
Exactly. Yeah, the blood being different. It's kind of, which is, gosh, I could go on about it, but it kind of like it harkens to like Icor and the blood of monsters and mythology, and there's something in us as human animals that if the blood is different, the creature is different fundamentally. Because there's no reason that stuff couldn't be red. Like, let's be perfect. If it was white, it could be red. Like it's one of these sort of things where it kind of gets like Virtuosity, where he bleeds that fantastic fluorescent blue eyeshadow. There's something again uncanny and very othering about the excision of a human body not being injured by what we perceive as causing injury. It is it's immediately othering.
Immediate. Yeah. My God.
More so than a fly landing on the eyeball, which they bloody love in this series.
They love flies in general. They made flies like little tiny baby fly robots are the means to controlling humans somewhere there in the third or fourth season.
I love it. I love that flies get their day in this series. We're not done. We're gonna do 5 minutes on flies, but the one it's so very, because as you say, there's no way they had all of these written. It's so very much like you can see in the writer's room, they like the flies. What if we brought back the flies? But like more of them. Like just more flies. I think we've got something here, guys. We're on to it.
We can definitely do flies in CGI. Definitely.
Oh yeah, we've got it. It's basically particle physics. It's going to be fine. We've got the ones from the first season. It's going to be great. But it is again, it's a very, you see, and you see it as a kind of trope in a lot of things, the fly landing on something and it not reacting because anything human would react. And again, it's another immediately othering moment, and it happens in a second, and it's very visual because you could write it in a book, but it would take a decent sentence or two to explain. And when you see the fly land and touch the second it touches the eyeball, that thing is not you. You know that thing is an other. And that kind of excision and removal of togetherness from the character is fantastic. It's really good. It's a lot of fun. Yeah, if people haven't seen it, they should watch it.
Jen, Thank you so much for all your time and your thoughts and feelings about the Westworlds. I was going to ask you why people should watch it now, but you've already said it. It's a great watch for a broken world.
It honestly, 100%.
Tagline.
And it is, I'm a big believer that films don't have to be perfect. TV series, they don't have to be perfect to enjoy them. And this is something to really be enjoyed. So I hope people do.
And Jen, before I let you go, where can people find more of your work online?
Fantastic. Well, so I'm on Blue Sky, which is not what I used to say at this point of a podcast. But Elon Musk is a bastard, and I can no longer encourage people to find me on Twitter. Yeah, come find me on Blue Sky. I'm relatively new over there, so I'll connect with Anna if people want to come check me out. But and I'm still on serving footage on Instagram. I'm going to be putting up some clips of some films coming up, if people want to check those out. So yeah, see them on the socials.
Thank you.